What's up, Cleftones? This is Darrin from CleftoneGrooves.com, and I am here today back on the Mac because I am traveling this week. I am in a hotel room, but I am still working hard to bring you this fourth and final installment on how to get amazing sounding interviews when you are interviewing other people, or even maybe if you're recording an interview where you're being interviewed yourself. So if you haven't seen any of the previous videos, I will highly recommend go back and watch those before you watch this fourth and final video. You can catch them at facebook.com/cleftonegrooves. Again, that's facebook.com/cleftonegrooves. In those previous videos for the last 3 weeks, we talked about automating our volume. We talked about fading your files so that you can have the beginnings and ending of your regions in Studio One not have any sudden abrupt noises just as they cut off or end. We also talk about adding EQ and compression to your files to make them sound really, really nice, and then further sweetening your sound with a little bit of noise reduction, putting your sounds in stereo, and also adding a little reverb to open it up a little bit and add an overall richness to the vocal quality of the talent here in this particular project. Now, this week, we're going to be talking about mastering that audio, and then I'm going to get into some other final thoughts that I have when it comes to audio. So we're going to look at analyzing the frequency spectrum. We're also going to talk about using EQ in a different way on the master channel. And then also one of my favorite plugins that I highly recommend everybody get for when they're working with their audio, and that is Waves L2. That plugin is really, really nice. So let's go ahead and jump right on into this. And I'm going to first of all start by saying, even after last week's video, I continued to listen to the audio for this interview. And one of the things that I noticed is that there was still just a little bit of low-end energy or rumble, or at least sound from the room, the environment, from like the air conditioning or whatever else was going on in the room that day, that I didn't really care for. And so it sounded like it was in the low end. So what I decided to do, just to be as precise as possible, I put a frequency spectrum on to my master track. And that is what we have here. So I used that to listen to the audio. And then from there, it helped me to kind of see where maybe some of that energy was coming from. So let me play this back and show you how this works. It basically, just like the EQ does, it'll give you the levels of the different frequencies. And that's kind of where I was able to kind of figure out where some of that low end energy was coming from. So let me just play it back really quick.
I'm here, and next on the CD, we have none other than Corey, the Builder. Corey Briggs. Corey, welcome.
Man, thank you very much, Dr. West. A pleasure to be here.
So again, you saw how there was a bit of a swell from 100 to the 200 and a little bit up from that range there. And if you listen carefully enough, if you rewind this video and play that back, you can still hear, well, actually you can't, because I already have my master channel mastered. But before I had it mastered, you could still hear some of that low end energy. And what I did was, after I saw where that extra energy was coming from that we didn't really need, I added an EQ. Now this is a third-party plugin. This is Waves' version of EQ, the Q10 paragraphic equalizer. But I mean, just the same thing could have very easily been accomplished with the EQ that comes stock with Studio One. But for this, I don't have a better reason other than I just wanted to try this particular EQ for this purpose. So what I did was, since I saw around that 100 to 200 range was where some of that extra energy seemed to come from, I just went ahead and just arbitrarily, I guess, if you will, picked a number that kind of split the difference, 150. And then what I did is I changed this here from peak EQ to a shelf EQ. And what I mean by that is, if I click this, notice it switched it the other way. So it's a shelf now that everything above 150 gets cut down by -3 decibels in gain. But then you can also do where it's a low pass. And what a low pass means is everything below 150 gets to come through, but everything above it is cut off, as you can tell from this line here. And of course, the opposite, high pass. Everything higher than 150 is let through, but everything below that is gone. So I'm going to go ahead and put this back to the shelf that I had at 150 here. And so again, that's where some of that energy was coming from. So I just cut it. And again, notice very small move here, because the biggest thing to remember is now we are working with the master channel. And when you put any kind of effect on the master channel, it's going to affect your whole entire project. So not only is this EQ going to change how Ruben sounds here, but it will also change how Corey sounds, because the buck stops with this channel. Every piece of audio, every track feeds into this master track. So again, all your main editing and mixing and things of that nature should mainly be done on the channel that needs the attention, rather than what I'll say as global focus, which is what this channel is, because it's the master channel. So very simple, straightforward move. Just cut out some of that energy. And then again, my favorite plugin that I highly recommend every one of you guys, if you're going to work with audio and make it sound really, really nice, this is a very special tool to me, the Waves L2 Ultra Maximizer. This thing is really, really cool. Remember in previous videos of this series, I talked about how we aren't making huge moves because we want to keep the sound as natural as possible. We don't want to hear our compressor working or our EQ or anything else working to the point that it's like, oh, wait, I actually hear that particular plugin working. We want it as transparent as possible. Well, this allows you to crank up your audio at the end to bring it up to competitive market levels for your listeners to be able to hear without turning up their stereos or turning it down because it's too loud or whatever. It's just a nice, comfortable level. But basically what this does is it allows you to set a limit that your levels will not go over. So I could leave this at 0, but if you've seen my previous videos where I talked about metering and levels and things of that nature, you know that clipping is bad. Even though this gets to 0 and it keeps the audio from clipping, that's still a little too close for comfort for me. So notice I dropped this down by minus 0.5 decibels, half a decibel, just to keep it from even touching 0. And then over here, the threshold, what that basically does is as you pull this lever down, your audio overall increases in the volume output. And so if I was to turn this off, notice how much softer the audio is, or how much lower in volume.
I'm here, and next on the CD, we have none other than Corey, the Builder.
So now if I turn this on,
I'm here, and next on the CD, we have none other than Corey, the Builder.
notice the difference. And again, you saw some attenuation here. You saw some gain reduction happening in this meter, but it wasn't very much. And I would say a good rule of thumb as far as attenuation, you noticed I maybe came down to -3, and depending on the different parts of this interview here, it might go down even as low as -6. That's kind of a safe range to be within. Any more than that, you kind of will start to hear this plugin working on keeping your audio levels down. And so that's one of the things that I really like about this when we're talking about being transparent. This plugin, not that I encourage this, but you can be just a little heavier handed with this than a lot of limiting plugins that I've used, and it still remains pretty transparent when it's turning up your overall level of your mix that you're working with. So that's pretty much it, guys. That's the mastering process when it comes to dialogue and these two interviews, but this is pretty much done. It's ready to go. And some other little things that I wanted to share with you, some other thoughts as I went throughout this process, some other things to keep in mind or think about is your order of your plugins can change the outcome of your sound. And what I mean by that is notice that each time, For Ruben's track here, I have the compressor last. For Corey's track here, I have the compressor last. I have the EQ before the compressor. And even with Corey, since I did the de-essing last week, I have the de-esser before the compressor. And then the same thing over here. The compressor kind of serves a similar function as the L2 limiter, but the limiter is pretty much it. A compressor squeezes the audio and allows it to still kind of get over the level that you set as far as the threshold. With the limiter, it says, nope, you're not getting over this level no matter how hard you try. That's the difference. So a limiter, you can make a compressor work like a limiter simply by turning the ratio up as much as you can. Then it's essentially becoming a limiter. So the order again here, I have this limiter last. And the reason is because if you happen to have peaks or different, and what I mean by peaks is if you look at these waveforms, notice this one is a smaller peak compared to this one, which is a bigger peak. So if I had that compressor on first thing and then I proceed to add EQ afterwards, that sometimes can affect the outcome of how your final audio is going to sound. And I have seen in situations where as I've mixed things, that will also sometimes cause a track to clip if it's loud enough. And again, we don't want clipping because that is bad news. So one of the things that I like to do is put my compressors all at the end just to keep the clipping from happening. And then it also kind of glues everything else together that I've got going on in each track, such as the de-esser and the Pro EQ. And then also the other thing is I personally like to put my noise reduction beforehand because then that way I know from whatever the noise reduction does, because that does change the character of your sound just a little bit, that helps me to make the EQ change afterwards rather than, okay, now I put this on here, now I've got to go back and fiddle with the EQ. If I just do this first, I know I kind of did that backwards in this in this tutorial that I did, but putting this first in your signal chain and then working with EQ from there, you don't have to go back and make those changes. And I was working from a file here. The reason that you saw me put this on in the third video is because I actually have already finished editing this. This product is already done and shipped and delivered to my client. So some of the things were already in place. So I kind of knew where everything needed to be anyway. But normally, yes, I would put this first, just my preference, because then when I set the EQ, it's already set. And then like de-essing and compression, all that can stay the same. And it's kind of like I'm building, it's like little building blocks here. First you do this, then you do the EQ, then you do the de-esser, then the compressor. All those things play into each other to give you the sound that you're hearing now. And the other thought that I had is that, I just want to talk about how this was recorded for a little bit. And that is that this interview, again, you've heard me mention this was recorded in a hotel room, but this interview was recorded using 2 Rode NT2A microphones and also 2 Aston microphone reflection filters. And then they were connected to a PreSonus Studio 192 audio interface. And there was some other equipment and other components involved, but with just those things alone, what I've just listed, that's over $2,000 worth of audio equipment. So why am I telling you this? The reason is because many people, while they do invest in audio equipment, a lot of times what they do is they get hung up on the price of their equipment and then they go the inexpensive route and their audio quality suffers because of going for the inexpensive items. But I really can't stress enough that when it comes to audio equipment, you really do get what you pay for. So if I could offer any further advice as far as sound and getting better sound, rather than getting hung up on the price of things, I would get hung up on the value each piece of gear will bring to your setup. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that you've got to go out and get the biggest, baddest, most expensive item of every piece of gear that you seek to get. But what I am trying to say is that if you have pride in your brand, then you must have pride in your sound because it's part of your brand. And, there's a reason that a $400 mic is $400. And there's a reason that a $30 microphone is $30. So, if anything, after this tutorial that you've just watched, I want you to know this, that I really hope that after watching this and listening to how good the sound is, that you start to take your sound all the more seriously. Do your research and, invest in quality gear. So hopefully, guys, you've enjoyed this series. If you want to see it all again, go to facebook.com/cleftonegrooves and you can check out the entire series, videos 1 through 4 on this. And also, by the way, if you have any audio that needs cleaned up or edited, send me a message at that same site at facebook.com/cleftonegrooves. Send me a message. We can discuss your project, and then we can see what I can do for you. And as always, if you guys are in need of licensing any music, at my website, cleftonegrooves.com, I'm always putting new music out there. So go take a listen, check it out, and maybe you might be able to find something there that you would really enjoy. So anyway, guys, here is to getting better audio at home. Yes, all good things must come to an end. This is the 4th installment of the series. So I'm going to say with that, have a great weekend and tune in next week when I've got another special treat for you.